Hello and welcome to Reporters, the show that brings you the best of France 24 reporting from around the world. Well, this week we bring you the story of an anti-nuclear struggle. The inhabitants of Gorleben, a town in northern Germany, have been battling against plans to store radioactive waste at a dump near their homes for 3 decades now. Well, it comes from Germany's nuclear power plants, but has been reprocessed in France and is now being sent back to Germany. Well, our reporter Anne Maillet went to Gorleben to meet the anti-nuclear activists.
In the Wendland forest of Lower Saxony, life moves to the rhythm of the anti-nuclear protest. It's a beat they've been following for the last 30 years. Germany's nuclear waste travels along these tracks, on its way from the treatment plant in The Hague. For weeks, activists have been preparing for the arrival of a 12th container of nuclear material.
This year, for the first time, we're going to ballast the containers.
What does that mean?
Look, this is ballast. We're going to take it away from under one side of the track to free it up. We'll take all of it away from one side and leave it under the other side. So if a train were to pass over it, it would topple over. So it has to stop.
Das heißt, kann dann nicht mehr da weiterfahren an der Stelle.
They're united in the struggle to stop nuclear waste from getting dumped on their land, yet the forms of protest are eclectic. Here, a group gathers every Sunday for the Gorleben prayer. This is their way of protesting the exploration of local salt reserves, which may one day be home to highly radioactive waste. Today, Eckhard Kruse, the local priest, has come with good news. His church and other landowners nearby managed to halt work at the site for the time being. The digging had only just started up again. We leave with the priest and head towards Gorleben.
Laufzeitverlängerung für Atomkraftwerke.
In Berlin, Parliament has just agreed to extend the lives of the country's nuclear power plants. That means another 12 years and another 500 containers of nuclear waste. A demonstration has been called for outside the site. Eckhard Kruse has lived here for 20 years, and for all that time, the priest has kept up his fight to protect the local land, some of which his church owns.
Das ist eigentlich ein Lebensmittel, was da drin ist, nämlich Salz.
You know the land here is full of salt. We believe it's very precious. That's what the people here lived off of thousands of years ago. It's intrinsic to our way of life, and we can't just give it up for something as harmful as this waste when there's no guarantee that it's the best solution.
To get back to the church grounds, Eckhard Kruse takes us down a track reserved for landowners. The path skirts the edge of the Gorleben test facility. Access to this area of the Wendland forest is strictly limited for security reasons. Eckhard Kruse leads us into a small pocket of the forest owned by his parish.
These two paths here you see are the boundaries. It's this triangle here on the map. It's pretty narrow, but it goes very deep. The salt and all the other riches which go deep down to the earth's core, that all belongs to us.
Other landowners have also refused to hand over the deeds to their land, and authorities have had to change how they carry out the exploration work.
Many of us around here think you can't really call this a test site anymore. It seems they planned this from the start. If you look at how far developed the work is and the infrastructure here, how can you even begin to think that this isn't already functioning as a permanent storage site?
Germany's not alone with the issue of where to store highly radioactive waste in the long term, but it's the only country to have only one test site. Germany only has Gorleben. The salt reserves in Wendland were thought to be a good location for the underground storage of nuclear waste. Exploration began there in 1979, but work was suspended in 2000. The Green Party had made it into the government in a coalition with the Social Democrats and imposed a moratorium. Since then, no exploration work has begun anywhere. But the containers of nuclear waste from the treatment plant in The Hague keep coming. Destination unknown. Awaiting a permanent storage site, they've been parked in a depot just around the corner from the test facility. Around here, everyone knows the waste is in Gorleben for good, And that's what's transformed Wendland into a bastion of the anti-nuclear campaign. In this old farming district, it's the farmers themselves who form the hard core of demonstrators. A yellow cross hanging on farms around here is a symbol of their protest. For more than 5 centuries, this farm has been passed down from father to son. Heinrich Pottmer will retire in just a few months' time. He's led the farmers' movement against Gorleben for 30 years now. In 1979, he was at the helm of the first major tractor demonstration in the area. The farmers stormed Hanover, the state capital. 100,000 came to witness the inaugural speech of the movement. The speaker was Heinrich Pottmer.
Back then, they sold us the idea by saying it was just a test, but in reality, they were already laying the foundations of the site. Their argument now, why they should carry on their work, is that they've already invested $1.5 billion in Gorleben. That's how you make your own arguments here, and that's how they perpetuate the Gorleben lie.
Now his son Fritz is preparing to take up the reins. Like father, like son. They're ready for the arrival of the next container of nuclear waste. Their anger is targeted directly at German Chancellor Angela Merkel and her government.
Ja, wir machen ja durch die schwarz-gelbe Bundesregierung laufend Rückschritte, was den Ausstieg aus der...
The coalition government is turning back the clock on the nuclear phase-out.
Wir halt ganz klarstellen,
It's now up to us, the people, to make it crystal clear that we won't simply accept that we'll stand up to it. We will not just roll over without a fight.
Ja, das darf nicht kampflos einfach so durchgesetzt werden.
I have a very good feeling that this time the containers will have to turn back. If all the people who've been campaigning so far really go onto the street, the police and the government will have a real problem on their hands.
Discontent has grown in Wendland since the Gorleben affair took on a new dimension a few months back. Cooped up in his farm in Wendland, Matthias Edler scoured hundreds of confidential files for Greenpeace. This is a list of potential storage sites analyzed by local geologists for the regional government in 1976. There's no mention of Gorleben.
But it wasn't this list of figures that was handed over to the state premier in Lower Saxony. It was this one. You can see the name Gorleben has been added by hand and given a very high compatibility rating. It was the regional finance ministry who did all it could to secure the site for Lower Saxony. 5 billion euros of investments, 5,000 jobs. That's all they were interested in. They were the ones who influenced the choice of the site and who gave this information to the state premier.
A tempting project for a region scarred by the wall, which had separated the country into east and west. A region suffering from one of the lowest population densities in the country. After the revelations came to light, a commission was assembled in Berlin and a parliamentary inquiry began. Its job, to establish the circumstances which led to the choice of Gorleben. We met one of the members of the commission, Dorothee Menzner, a member of the Left Party. With a group of colleagues, she recently dug up some alarming documents in the archives of the Stasi, the East German secret police, and published them. The papers describe a gas explosion in 1969 in Linsen in the former East Germany. There was 1 casualty and 6 were injured. The incident was filed and forgotten. Linsen is just a few dozen kilometers away from Gorleben.
Was bedeutet es, wenn unter oder am Rande von diesem Salzstock Gasvorkommen?
Naturally, we're discussing what it means if gas deposits are allowed to sit under or on the edge of the salt dome, and what it means to really store radioactive material in this location. We discovered that they didn't investigate any of this in the 70s and 80s. It was difficult back then. But even in the last 20 years after the tests had been done, the results were never examined or analysed to decide whether Gorleben was suitable or not.
Nicht einbezogen wurden in die Überprüfung, ob Gorleben überhaupt geeignet ist.
Is there still strong political will to keep exploring Gorleben as a permanent storage site? An interview arranged with a representative from the site was cancelled at the last minute. The environment minister responsible for the project turned down our interview request. In Gato, not far from Gorleben, we were able to meet a rare supporter of the site. Hans-Udo Mauri is the volunteer mayor of a small community which profited from the 20 years of exploration. But when work at the site stopped, the fortunes of his town of 1,400 inhabitants dwindled.
A large number of craftsmen found a good source of work here. Around the site there were lots of jobs. The restaurants, bakeries and butchers prospered as well. The place blossomed over those 15-20 years, and then it stopped all of a sudden. There were around 1,000 people and their families who'd come here. They've gone now.
On the other side of the argument over the provisional storage of nuclear waste in the region, 5 local councils receive 700,000 euros per year. Others have refused substantially larger sums in order to preserve their lands. The biggest landowner in the area is the Bernstorff family. For their estate near Gorleben, the family was offered 30 million Deutschmarks. They refused. Count Bernstorff used to be a member of the Christian Democrats, but he closed that chapter of his life 30 years ago and began protesting against the site. A conservationist and ecologist, today he's seen as sort of an éminence grise of the anti-Gorleben movement.
I think that the next container and the demonstrations that will accompany it will be a fairly big challenge for the city. I would like to see them take a break, gather the managers and critics around a table and try to find a solution that can be sustained beyond this legislative period. We'll try to convince the politicians to do that. It's unclear whether we'll succeed, but we can't force it, and we can't blast our way through brick walls.
But even if the government does go back on its decision, where in Germany will people agree to live with nuclear waste on their doorstep? The strength of the resistance movement here is very strong, and a new location for a future site to store highly radioactive waste is still a distant reality.
Well, I'm now joined by Anne Maillet, the journalist who brought us that report. And so the battle against the delivery of this nuclear waste has been going on for 3 decades now, but it doesn't seem to be making any difference.
No, it's true that for the inhabitants of Wendland, it's an old battle which is resuming today. They had hopes at the beginning of the years 2000 when the moratorium was imposed by the Green. The moratorium stopped exploration at Gorleben, and they really hoped that this was over once and for all. Angela Merkel arrived in power, and she was able to set up a coalition with the Liberals, and she had announced that when she would be leading the government, that she would relaunch exploration of the saline layers, and for the people in the area, it's a real disaster.
Just how dangerous is this waste?
Well, it's difficult to tell, but a lot of experts consider that the storage of nuclear waste in saline geological layers is a mistake. We have 2 very striking examples in Germany of storage centers for waste of medium and low intensity, Mosleben and Hasse, and these 2 storage sites are literally flooded. There are real problems in these saline layers due to corrosion, due to the water which is infiltrated into the storage center, and one can really wonder whether one continues to explore Gorleben when you have these very serious problems in the other storage sites.
But nobody wants this waste, so where else could the German government put it?
Well, that's a headache for the German authorities. They've been wondering about this for the past 30 years. Not only do the different governments, the Green, the Social Democrats, Christian Democrats, they've been looking for a site, but obviously everyone is aware that no one will accept to live with the waste so close to home. And there are apparently granite layers which could be suited for the storage of nuclear waste. Baden-Württemberg and Bavaria are the lender which produce the greatest amount of nuclear energy and have a lot of nuclear power plants, but obviously it's out of the question to consider having storage sites there. The regional authorities would refuse this.
Thanks very much for that, Anne Maillet. Well, that's all we have time for today. Do join us again next week. Goodbye.